You were almost there. Again. The interview was going well. The gym routine was finally sticking. You were one conversation away from healing that relationship, and then you ghosted. You froze. You quit. Why? Most people would call it laziness, inconsistency, or lack of willpower. But what if none of those are true? What if you're not afraid of failing, but of what happens if you actually succeed? Because success isn't just a reward, it's exposure, it's responsibility. It's a new version of you that feels unfamiliar. And deep down, something in you whispers, maybe I'm not ready for that. Maybe I'm not worthy of it. That whisper, that's the inner critic you didn't invite, but never managed to silence. It's the voice of old wounds dressed up as caution. It says, stay where it's safe, but it really means, stay where it's small. This is self-sabotage, not a conscious choice, but a subconscious protection mechanism. It hides in your habits. It speaks through procrastination, through overthinking, through silence. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And that's why it's so powerful. You're not broken, you're blocked. And behind that block is a hidden fear. The fear of what you might lose if you finally become who you were meant to be. Will they still love you if you grow too much? Will you still belong if you change? What if getting everything you wanted leaves you more alone than before? These questions don't live on the surface. They operate in the shadows, guiding your behavior without your consent. But here's the truth you've been waiting for. Self-sabotage isn't proof you're weak. It's proof you once had to protect yourself. And somewhere along the way, you just forgot how to stop. This video is not about blaming you for the walls you built. It's about understanding why they were built in the first place and how to start breaking free from them, brick by brick. Because if you've been stuck in cycles that make no sense, if you're tired of watching yourself give up right before the finish line, if you're exhausted from running from your own potential, you're not alone, and you're not doomed to repeat it. We'll go deep into the psychology of sabotage, unpack the emotional logic of fear, and give you tools to finally reclaim your momentum, your worth, yourself. You're not lazy, you're just afraid, and that fear can be faced. Let's begin. You've probably lived this scene more than once. You start something new with excitement, a job, a relationship, a habit. For a few weeks it's all working. Then, out of nowhere, something in you pulls the brakes. You miss a call, you skip a session, you send the text you know you'll regret. Or worse, you don't send anything at all. And suddenly, you're watching your own progress fall apart like a house of cards. Again, it feels irrational, frustrating, exhausting. But here's the truth. This pattern isn't random. It's a loop, a well-worn subconscious loop. Psychologists call it self-sabotage, but it doesn't look like sabotage at first. It looks like taking a break, or giving space, or waiting for the right time. It disguises itself as logic, but it's fear wearing a suit. See, every time you're about to break through, your brain runs a silent check-in. Will this change who I am? Will people expect more from me? Will success make me too visible, too vulnerable? If the answer feels uncertain, the inner alarm goes off, and without even realizing it, you pull yourself back to the familiar, back to safety, back to smallness. Think about Lisa, 35 from Chicago. She finally lands a freelance gig that could open doors. The client loves her work. She gets great feedback. Then suddenly, she misses a deadline, sends a clumsy excuse. The project falls through. Again, Lisa isn't careless. She's talented, driven, but inside, there's a belief. If I grow too much, people will expect more than I can give. If I shine too bright, they'll see my flaws up close. If I succeed, I might be rejected anyway, and that would hurt more. That belief runs the show, not because it's true, but because it feels safe. And the mind, above all else, is wired for safety. Self-sabotage is emotional logic. It's your brain saying, I'd rather lose on purpose than risk being hurt by surprise. And over time, this loop becomes predictable. Start, progress, trigger, sabotage, shame, repeat. A cycle dressed in self-help quotes but anchored in fear. And here's the catch. Every time it happens, the shame grows louder. You tell yourself, what's wrong with me? You see others succeed and assume they have something you don't, but they don't. What they've learned, often the hard way, is how to interrupt the loop, how to spot the trigger before it hijacks the outcome. And that's what we're here to do. Not shame you for repeating the pattern, but show you how to step out of it. Because once you see the loop, you can finally choose to break it. The fear won't vanish overnight, but the awareness? That's the crack in the wall. And from that crack, something new begins. When people talk about fear, they usually mean fear of failure. But what if that's not the full picture? What if what's holding you back is the quiet, paralyzing fear of what happens if you actually succeed? Sounds strange, right? But if you've ever felt a rush of anxiety right after good news, a promotion, a compliment, a breakthrough, you know what I'm talking about. You feel exposed, like suddenly everyone's watching, like now you have to live up to something. That's not laziness. That's not imposter syndrome alone. That's fear of success, and it's more common than anyone wants to admit, because success isn't just a reward, it's a change. And change? It threatens everything your brain has labeled as safe. Let's talk about David, 42, from Atlanta. He spent years in a job he hated, always saying, "Someday, I'll open my own shop." One day, the opportunity came. An investor believed in him. The papers were ready. But instead of signing, he ghosted the deal. He told himself it wasn't the right time. He told others he was thinking it through. But deep down, he was terrified. Because if he signed those papers, he'd no longer be the underdog with a dream. He'd be the man who had to deliver. He'd be the man whose excuses expired. And that felt like death to his nervous system. Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist at Stanford, explains this perfectly. When the brain perceives change, even positive, it activates the same circuits as it does for threat. Your body goes into protective mode, not because something is wrong, but because something is different. And if different means pressure, exposure, or potential rejection, your subconscious would rather stay broke than feel that risk. You're not crazy for fearing success. You're wired to survive. But here's the twist. What helped you survive yesterday may be what's killing your growth today. That fear of success? It often comes from old emotional injuries. Moments when trying harder didn't pay off. When standing out led to being punished or left behind. When responsibility meant carrying too much, too soon. So now, every step toward expansion feels like a threat. Not because it is, but because your body remembers what it once cost you to reach higher. And unless you rewrite that association, your brain will sabotage your rise to protect your old wounds. Here's the good news. Success doesn't have to mean pressure. It can mean freedom. It can mean alignment, but only when it's driven from clarity, not compensation. You don't have to prove them wrong to grow. You don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve peace. You just have to stop mistaking survival for safety. The fear of success isn't a myth. It's a form of self-defense. But defense against a future you're strong enough to face now. And the moment you name that fear, you reclaim your choice. You hear it every day, but you've never seen its face. It sounds like reason, like truth, like protection. Mostly, though, it sounds like someone constantly disappointed in you. That voice in your head, the one that hisses, "You're not ready. You always mess this up. Who do you think you are?" That isn't you. That's your inner critic and, spoiler, it didn't start in your own voice. The inner critic is a collage of borrowed voices we absorb, not invent. Parents who equated love with achievement. Teachers who circled mistakes in red but never praised the effort in blue. Bosses who remembered every flaw but forgot every win. Even friends whose teasing cut deeper than they knew. None of them needed to scream. A raised eyebrow or a disappointed sigh was enough. We internalized it all, because as kids, survival meant belonging. Fast forward 20 years, and we're still confusing survival logic with identity. We tell ourselves, this is just how I motivate myself, but it isn't motivation. It's mental sandpaper, always rubbing, never building. Enter Dr. Kristen Neff, pioneer of self-compassion research at the University of Texas. Her studies track thousands of students, athletes, and entrepreneurs. The data are brutal. Harsh self-criticism correlates with lower achievement, higher anxiety, and faster burnout. Why? Because every time you berate yourself, your body goes into threat response. Heart rate up, cortisol flooding, prefrontal cortex, aka clear thinking, dialing down. In other words, the brain you need for peak performance is the first thing your inner critic shuts off. You felt it. The exam room. You studied all week. One question looks tricky. The inner critic snarls, "Idiot. You always blank on tests." Pulse spikes. Working memory freezes. The answer you know drifts just out of reach. The team meeting. You have a solid idea. Voice inside whispers, "Don't embarrass yourself." You stay silent. Someone else suggests the same thing, gets the credit, and you're left fuming at how passive you are. Fuel for the next round of self-loathing. The first date. Conversation flows until a lull. Inner critic pipes up. "See? You're boring." You over-explain, laugh too loud, spill your drink. The spiral becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Neff's work shows a different path. Self-compassion, treating yourself like a respected friend. Think that sounds soft? Stanford's neuroimaging labs show it's practical neuroscience. Self-compassion reactivates the prefrontal cortex, calms the amygdala, and restores problem-solving capacity. Translation: kindness keeps the brain online. Imagine two inner coaches at the gym. Coach A barks, "Pathetic rep, you're weak." Stress spikes, form collapses, injury risk rises. Coach B corrects firmly but says, "Set your feet, breathe, you've got this." Muscles relax, posture improves, weight goes up. Same body, different voice, radically different outcome. Monica, 29, Denver, recently tested this. For years, she rewrote every client proposal 5 times, sabotaging deadlines. On Neff's advice, she tried a 3-step pause. Acknowledge pain, remind common humanity, offer kindness. The inner monologue shifted from, "You'll blow it," to, "It's normal to feel pressure. Let's submit the best draft we have." She hit send after 2 edits, landed the contract, and felt her shoulders unclench for the first time in months. Self-compassion isn't permission to slack. It's permission to perform without the whip. It says, "I can correct myself without condemning myself." And correction without condemnation is the sweet spot where growth actually sticks. So, next time the inner critic storms in, 1. Name the voice. Whose words are these? Dad at the dinner table? A coach from sophomore year? 2. Check the data. Does tearing myself down ever push me forward, or just wear me out? 3. Rewrite the line. Shift from "you're hopeless" to "you're learning." From "you'll fail" to "you can adjust." Simple swaps, massive biochemical payoff. Remember, humility isn't hating yourself quietly, and caution isn't the same as truth. The voice in your head isn't automatically authority. Ask, would I let someone speak to my best friend like this? If the answer is no, then it's time to evict that tone from the penthouse suite of your mind. Because when your inner protector speaks louder than your inner judge, you don't just feel better, you perform better. Not in spite of kindness, but because of it. And that's the real flex. Winning without bleeding self-worth all over the finish line. Sometimes the most dangerous kind of failure is the one that feels comfortable. Because not all failure is accidental. Some of it is armor, a shield, a subconscious choice to lose on purpose, so you don't have to face what winning would cost. Sound strange? Here's how it works. Your nervous system doesn't only respond to danger, it responds to memory. And if your body learned years ago that standing out led to punishment, that speaking up led to humiliation, that achieving something meant being left behind, then it's no surprise that part of you decided it's safer to stay small. Let's talk about Jamal, 24, just graduated from a top university in New York. Everyone's telling him he's going places, but when the job interviews come, he bombs them. Not because he's not qualified, but because he downplays himself, mumbles, avoids eye contact. His subconscious isn't trying to sabotage him out of laziness. It's trying to protect him from the discomfort of being seen too clearly. Because being seen means being evaluated, and being evaluated feels dangerous, especially when you've tied your worth to perfection or survival to invisibility. This is emotional armor. It's the smile you put on when you're falling apart. The "I'm just tired" when you're actually afraid. The "I'll do it tomorrow" when tomorrow is just code for "I don't feel safe today." And here's the wild part. The brain doesn't care if the armor keeps you from thriving. It only cares if it keeps you alive, or at least feeling safe. So you fail softly, subtly. You don't blow up your life. You just never fully live it. Sometimes that looks like perfectionism. Other times it's procrastination. Sometimes it's overcommitting until you collapse. Other times it's undercommitting so you never risk being too much. Whatever the shape, the goal is always the same. Don't get hurt again. And in a twisted way, failing on purpose feels like control. You get to say, I chose this. You get to avoid the pain of rejection because you pre-rejected yourself. But here's what that logic ignores. Every time you armor up, you delay the life waiting on the other side of the risk. You trade possibility for protection, joy for numbness, power for quiet shame. And while that might feel safer, it also makes you feel invisible, like you're watching your own life from behind glass. But what if you didn't need the armor anymore? What if you could learn to protect yourself without shrinking yourself? That's where transformation begins, not with brute force, not with pushing through, but with recognizing that the fear underneath your sabotage is valid. And still, you can choose something new. You've been failing to stay safe. Now imagine what might happen if you succeeded, with support, clarity, and presence. Not to prove yourself, but to be yourself, fully. Ever feel like your life is just the same story on loop? New faces, new jobs, new cities, but somehow, the same ending? That's not bad luck. That's not the universe plotting against you. That's a repetition pattern. And unless you become aware of it, it wins every time. Here's the harsh truth. Your brain doesn't care if something makes you happy. It cares if it feels familiar. And what's familiar becomes safe, even if it's destroying you. You're not addicted to pain. You're addicted to predictability. Let's say you grew up around emotional chaos, never knowing when the next storm would hit. Now as an adult, stable love feels weird. Someone treats you kindly, your brain short-circuits. You sabotage, you pick a fight, you ghost them. Not because you're broken, but because calm feels unsafe. Let's look at Alex, 37, from Portland. He's dated different people, switched careers twice, moved to a new city. But somehow the same thing keeps happening. He gets close, things get real, and he pulls away. He tells himself, it's just not right, or they weren't the one. But deep down, it's not about the person, it's about the pattern. That's the trap. You recreate the emotional climate you were trained to survive. Not consciously, not because you want to, but because your nervous system says, this is what we know, stay here. And it's not just in love, it's in money, work, friendships, self-image. If you've always felt like the underdog, you might unconsciously stay there, even when the opportunity to rise shows up. You miss the deadline, you undersell yourself, you wait too long to speak up, and later you say, I knew this would happen. But what you don't say is, part of me needed it to happen, because success felt like a betrayal of my identity. That's how deep these patterns run. They're not just habits, they're emotional algorithms built on childhood code. And unless you rewrite the code, the pattern repeats. The good news? Neuroplasticity is real. Your brain can literally rewire with intentional practice and awareness. But first, you have to see the loop. Start asking, when do I usually pull away? What emotions feel strangely comfortable even when they hurt? Who do I keep becoming, even when I try not to? These questions aren't easy. They're not meant to be. But they're the doorway to breaking the trap. Because patterns win when they're invisible. Once you name them, they lose power. You can still feel the fear and choose differently. You can interrupt the urge to flee. You can stay present when your instincts scream to run. It's not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about noticing when the old you tries to take the wheel and saying, not this time. That's how healing begins. One small, consistent interruption at a time. Some wounds don't scream, they whisper. They echo in the moments you don't speak up, don't apply, don't ask for more. The world never sees the real you. Not because you're invisible, but because you've learned to stay silent. Silence is the strategy no one talks about. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the decision to dim your light before anyone asks you to. And for a lot of people, silence is survival. It's what kept them safe in homes where emotions weren't welcome. It's how they avoided being mocked at school or being too much in relationships. It's what helped them blend in a world that didn't reward standing out. But here's the price of that silence. Eventually, you forget how to tell the truth about who you are, even to yourself. Take Rachel, 32, from Austin. She's got a stable job, a solid group of friends, a life that looks fine. But she hasn't written a song in 3 years, even though music once made her feel alive. Why? Because somewhere along the way she started believing no one's really listening, and if they are, they'll laugh. So she stays quiet, smiles through meetings, posts the safe stuff on social media, and inside, she's fading. That's the hidden cost of silence. You look functional, you sound polite, you're liked, but you're not known. And being unknown, while constantly performing, is one of the loneliest places to live. Carl Rogers, one of the most respected American psychologists, once said, "What is most personal is most universal." Translation: the parts you hide, your dreams, your fears, your truth, are the very things that connect you to others. But when you silence them, you sever that connection. Here's the paradox. We think silence protects us, but over time, it just isolates us. You stop speaking because you're afraid of rejection, but now you're not being rejected. You're being ignored. You wanted safety, but got invisibility. And that invisibility becomes a slow kind of death, a quiet grief for the life you never stepped into, not because the world said no, but because you never gave it the chance to say yes. But here's what you need to hear. You're not too late. You're not too much. You're just unspoken. And the antidote to silence isn't shouting. It's honesty. It's showing up, bit by bit, truth by truth. Start small. Tell someone what you really want, even if your voice shakes. Admit that you care, that you dream, that you're still in there. Because the moment you tell the world who you are, you give others permission to do the same. And maybe for the first time, you stop performing, and you finally feel seen. Healing sounds beautiful. We talk about it like a destination, peace, clarity, freedom. But there's a truth most self-help books avoid. Part of you doesn't want to heal, not because you're weak, not because you're broken beyond repair, but because healing requires something terrifying, letting go of the identity built around pain. You see, for many people, suffering becomes a compass. They know who they are by the struggles they carry. I'm the anxious one. I'm the one who never gets chosen. I'm the one who keeps starting over. And letting go of that feels like erasing the story that kept them alive. Let's talk about Marcus, 40, from Detroit. He's been in therapy for a year, wants to break free from patterns that ruined 3 relationships. But every time he gets close to a breakthrough, he pulls back, cancels sessions, numbs out on his phone. Why? Because healing would mean finally forgiving himself. It would mean dropping the guilt, letting go of the shame. And some part of him still believes he deserves to suffer a little longer. That's the hidden layer of resistance. It's not just fear of change. It's fear of who you'll be without your wounds. Will people still connect with me? Will I still belong if I'm not hurting? What if I heal, and it still doesn't fix everything? That kind of resistance doesn't scream. It shows up quietly, in hesitation, in distractions, in busyness. You scroll instead of reflect. You stay productive instead of present. You fill your calendar so there's no space for truth. Psychologist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, says something powerful. The body always keeps track of unresolved trauma, and healing often triggers the same alarms as the trauma itself. In other words, the process of healing can feel like danger to a nervous system that survived chaos. So your resistance? It's not rebellion. It's self-protection. It's the younger version of you still gripping the steering wheel, afraid that if they relax, the whole car crashes. But here's the shift. You can thank that part of you. You can honor what it tried to do. And still, you can invite it to rest, because you're not in the same danger anymore. You're not that powerless kid, that lost teenager, that unseen adult. You have more tools now, more awareness, more choice. And healing isn't about deleting the past. It's about updating your relationship with it. You don't have to want to heal with your whole body. You just have to be willing to move forward, even if some parts of you shake. Resistance is not failure, it's feedback. And when you stop fighting it, you finally learn to listen. That's when real healing begins. Not as a perfect journey, but as an honest one. You already know the cycle. You've lived it more times than you can count. You dream, you begin, you sabotage, you shrink, you repeat, you promise. Next time will be different. But next time looks a lot like last time. So here's the question that matters now. When does it end? When do you stop giving your past the power to define your future? Because here's the truth you've been circling. Maybe for years. You were never broken. You were conditioned, trained to believe that shrinking was safety, that silence was survival, that failure was your only option. But none of that was ever your truth. It was just the armor they gave you to wear. The good news? You can take it off now. No one is coming to do it for you. There's no perfect timing, no magical epiphany where suddenly everything feels easy. But there is this moment, right now, where you see the pattern clearly, and you realize you don't have to obey it anymore. That self-doubt you carry, inherited, that fear of being too much, projected onto you, that guilt for wanting more, implanted by people who never learned to receive, none of it is yours. And yet, you've been dragging it through every chapter of your life. It's not your job to become someone new. It's your job to return to the version of you that existed before the fear was taught. The one who believed, the one who spoke freely, the one who wasn't afraid of light, only taught to dim it. And yes, it's terrifying to let go, to release the story you've used to explain your stuckness, to drop the identity that once made you feel protected. But you're not that person anymore. You've outgrown the armor. You've outgrown the excuses. It's time to break the pattern, not with force, but with truth. Tell the truth about what you want. Tell the truth about who you are. Tell the truth about how tired you are of playing small so others can feel comfortable. The world does not benefit from your silence. Your dreams don't survive your self-rejection, and your future doesn't wait forever. You are the interruption, the shift, the moment the cycle ends. Because here's the final twist. It was never fear of failure that held you back. It was the cost of becoming powerful, but you can afford it now. You've already paid enough in anxiety, delay, regret, and loneliness. Now it's time to reclaim the life that's always been yours. The one beneath the noise, beneath the shame, beneath the patterns. You don't need permission. You don't need perfection. You just need to begin again. This time, with both eyes open. So if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. You made it here. Through every chapter, every reflection, every quiet truth that maybe, just maybe, hit closer than you expected. That's not an accident. That's proof. Proof that part of you is ready. Not ready to be perfect. Not ready to never feel fear again, but ready to stop lying to yourself. Ready to stop playing the same role in a story you didn't write. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're awakening. And no, breaking the cycle won't be linear. You'll wobble. You'll forget. You'll hear the inner critic again. But now you'll recognize it. Now you'll know. That voice isn't truth. That loop isn't destiny. That fear isn't final. So here's what you do next. Take one small action today, one that your old self would have avoided. Speak up, finish the project, message that person, rest without guilt. Say, I want this, and mean it. And if this video spoke to something buried deep inside you, don't leave quietly. Comment below, I see the pattern, and I'm ready to break it. Let it be your public permission slip, your line in the sand. Subscribe if your mind has been begging for more than surface-level solutions. This channel is your space, for clarity, for healing, for real inner work. We don't do noise here, we do truth. Share this with someone who's stuck in the same loop. You never know what one video, or one sentence, can awaken in someone silently fighting. You've survived. Now it's time to rebuild. Intentionally, fully, unapologetically. You're not alone anymore. Let's walk this out, together.